This is going to be the training on SimObserver 4.0. We are going to discuss about the features of SimObserver and Data Distillery and how to access your data once you've run it through SimCreator DX in experimenter mode. So you would launch SimObserver as part of your starting process that will run and capture the videos of all of your simulated data during an experiment or scenario run. So SimObserver, this is what it might basically look like. You have a splitter or multiplexer that is connected to multiple cameras, and those cameras are then streaming the video to the capture card in SimObserver. And then that SimObserver computer is connected to the center channel computer. And the center channel computer is actually giving data over to the SimObserver computer. So that data is also being collected and used in the data distillery tool. So we're going to talk about kind of how SimObserver plays a part in analyzing your data for your simulation. So SimObserver captures video and data in real time. It generates the following 5 files: a MP4 file for the video, an event file, a data file, a log file, and an IG stream capture file. So we'll talk about how that capture file comes into play, but your simulator will be able to collect all of these files. This is an example of what the SimObserver window will look like. We have a title bar, a menu bar, a video window, the status icon, a control toolbar, and the status bar. The file menu has the following options. You can select new, and this will give you a new base name. This base name is used to store the video and event files generated in each capture session. So since SimCreator is directly linked with SimObserver, when I go to run my scenario in SimCreator DX, that will automatically create a new base name, and that base name will be the file name for all of the recordings for that specific scenario run. Exit will close SimObserver. We also have configuration in the edit menu, so you can configure the dialog that contains the standard configuration settings. And then the advanced configuration here goes through our Configuration.xml. So the Configuration.xml is gives you more advanced hardware, which references the LS graph file, which gives you the capture graph for your capture card. So all of this configuration is pre-done for your system, but if by any chance you upgrade or add additional cameras, you'll be going through this configuration to make those adjustments. This is an example of what you might see in a Configuration.xml file. It will call for the media graph. This media graph tag will grab the file name as well as the LS graph file. That LS graph file, if you're using HD, will be lsgraph.xml or lsgraph.uhd if you're using SimObserver UHD. The window size configures the initial size of the SimObserver window. In this case, it will be 1920 by 1080. If you might be using the UHD model, which is our 4K variant, that might be a 4K screen instead. The full screen option allows you to configure whether or not the SimObserver application opens in full screen. You can toggle this, and you can also adjust the border size, which will create a red border around the SimObserver window when SimObserver is recording. So you can make this full screen and by hitting Alt-Enter, and then you hit Escape to exit out of that full screen. The Decklink Capture tab here, this will give you the camera input for the LS graph, displaying the amount of cameras that will be showing in SimObserver. So this option is only used in SimObserver HD, but you can see here that you can select the amount of cameras that you want to display in SimObserver. The file dialog specifies the initial directory SimObserver will display when the user wants to open the file. And then you also have a capture directory, which is directory that the files get saved, as well as a data rate and a default TCF file. So we'll talk about what a title or config file is, and these get used for adding overlays on top of your video. The view and overlay menu, the view menu has a run log. This displays the run log for SimObserver for the current video that's being run. And then you also have that full screen option there to hit Alt-Enter to make SimObserver full screen, and then you can hit Escape to bring it back to windowed. You can also, in the overlay menu, you have a load config. This allows you to load a TCX file or TCF file, and then you can also convert a TCF file to a TCX. Since you are not going to use TCF files or any legacy files since you're making this from scratch, we'll go through being able to edit your own TCX file and what that looks like. So a title or Configuration.xml file or TCX file allows you to add additional titles and display data on top of your SimObserver capture window. So you'll have your video recording of your 4 different camera angles. One of them will be a capture of the center channel. One will be a capture of the footwell. The other one would be a capture of the top down facing the driver, and the other one will be capturing the steering wheel. So each one of those, you can place the different titles. So I'll go back to this picture here. And in this picture, we have a throttle and brake. Those are titles that we've added so that you can see those outputs next to the footwell. In addition, we have this speed of the vehicle here that we can also capture. So these are the different camera angles that you'll be seeing when you're recording SimObserver. So in order to adjust these titles, we have a title name as well as an option of whether or not we want to collect data on those specific titles. So the title name is going to refer to the same titles that you're using in your data merge block from the VC generic titler. So what I mean by that is in SimCreator in your model. So if I open up your model in SimCreator, in the center channel group, you have a component called VC generic titler. If I go to the set values for this component, I have title tags. Each one of these title tags is what I will be referring to in my title or config file that I can adjust. So each one of these title tags will refer to the different titles that I want to use to display the data that I'm recording from my simulation. So if I wanted to get to the brake data, I would go to my title or config file. So I go to C, RTI, and go to title or config. And in here, I have some examples of some TCX files. The default TCX file will be our full sim TCX. And I can edit this in a text editor. And here I will see the TCX file, and I will see the appropriate title name, which will relate to the same title name that I see in my VC generic titler component. So it'll look for that brake name, and then it'll give it a position on the screen. So this is a relative position that you can move around, as well as changing the RGB color of the actual title, the font and size of the title, and then your format string here is going to be what the actual title says. So the title name refers to the VC generic titler component's title tag. Whether or not it's visible and whether or not it's collecting data are the toggles between either 0 or 1. And then this format string here is what you'd actually be seeing in SimObserver as the title. Are there any questions so far on TCX files, how to use a TCX file, or anything along those lines? All right. So there are there's two modes in SimObserver. There's a monitor mode and a recording mode. When you launch SimObserver, it starts in monitor mode. It will be actively having the screens display, but they're not recording anything. So the cameras are on. You'll be able to preview the video and audio during monitor mode. As well as title configuration. So you can modify the title configuration and kind of see the placement of all of the different titles and make sure you're happy with it before you go through the recording mode to record the simulation. So a DAT file or .dat file is one of the output files once SimObserver is completed recording, and that data file contains all of the values from the simulation or an external connection. So the simulator is going to be sending data to the VC generic titler component. That data is also being read as those overlays, but is being recorded into this data file that you can access in Data Distillery. So when we go through Data Distillery, I'll show you an example of a data file, but you can take this data file and export it to Excel or another analysis tool if you'd like to use that rather than using our Data Distillery tool. An event file allows you to capture specific times during your scenario. So if you wanted to, in a maneuver, you can add SimObserver.event and give it an event name. So this will allow you to set a specific event during your simulation. So that will allow you to kind of narrow down where you want to collect data rather than having to kind of scrub through all of the data from that simulation run. So event files can be useful because they give you basically markers where you can jump to for your simulation. Synchronization. We try to synchronize the video latency and network latency by adjusting the frames so that they are in sync when you're looking at the data through Data Distillery. So we do this ahead of time to make sure that everything is working correctly. But you can adjust these by going through the VC generic titler or adjusting the different rates for data collection. The SimObserver 4.0 utilizes Tcl and C++ libraries. So there are commands that you can use by creating your own Tcl script to control SimObserver 4.0. So if you are interested in doing anything like that, there are some typical commands that you can use by creating your own Tcl scripts. So the process flow is you go through the video capture. So you capture your video, your event data, you collect all your streaming data. So this is you launching SimObserver, you're running through the simulation. And then once you've completed the scenario, you'd stop the simulation, and then that data would get saved off into a data folder. So that data folder can get accessed by Data Distillery, and then you'd be able to analyze that data and you can follow along, and the data is synchronized with the video file as well as your capture file, which is this IG stream here. So we'll go through